Hi, beautiful souls. This is Sadhana, and welcome to my channel. Today, I am going to share with you some reflections on my card of the year. The card for 2020 for me is the Devil, the 15th card in the Major Arcana. And I have been delaying creating this video. It's a rather challenging card to talk about, and I'm going to share with you a bunch of different resources, information from different decks, and some of my own reflections on my personal journey with this card so far. From the Margaret Peterson Guidebook. The Devil. Confusion in the passionate flame, fears and desires, always the same questions and no answers. Regarding the shadows in the mirror, rewinding the memories and emotions, captivating fantasy. Only the voice of hunger and thirst can be heard. Thinking becomes impersonal, mechanical, predictable. Beauty misused, separated from yourself, in the sharpened vision at the point of brilliance, new perspectives open. Really great poem. Well, all of the poems in the Margaret Peterson Guidebook are brilliant, but there's something about that particular one that really is a vehicle into the window of understanding what this card is about. This is a really challenging card, and I speak both personally and universally as a tarot teacher and as a yoga instructor and things like that, because these are issues that we all face on a daily basis, and there is this sense of illusion, this attachment to materialism, and this constant challenge of getting away from the senses. There's this need, for ice cream cones and money and cupcakes and wine and passion, and we all need and feel a sense of comfort in different ways from all of these things. And I really believe that there's nothing wrong with any of these passions, of these comforts. It's our sense of moderation that is lacking. That lesson from the 14th card hasn't been understood. It hasn't been integrated. And so in this card, we are being challenged with, it's almost like a test from the 14th card. Did we learn the lesson? And there's this sense of, no, perhaps we didn't, or there's an aspect of it that needs to be revisited. And so we come to this 15th card and we look at all of these so-called weaknesses that we have. And there's been so many tarot tube videos that ask these kind of challenging questions, and they're often taken really, really lightly. And I think this card we tend to avoid talking about because the questions are deep and they hurt and they touch on reality in a way that, can be a little too much, for a YouTube video. When I look at this card from the New Era Elements, or this particular card, this is from the Way Home Tarot. This is from, on the right, from the Way of the Panda. We're looking at social and political questions that sometimes hit a little too close to home. I'm sure at some point or another we've all been to a zoo or to a circus or some kind of an exhibition where a wild creature and a wild animal has been restrained or put into a costume or decorated or manipulated in some way. And so this, we have to, in this card, when it appears like in the Way Home Tarot or in the Way of the Panda, to look at why as humans we choose to do that. And I'm thinking about my experiences in India, seeing elephants on the street and elephants decorated and elephants even being brought into the temple to be part of the ceremony of blessing people and the way that they are controlled by their users and so forth. And then I look at these cards, and the joy that this brought to me without, as a child, understanding what had happened to these animals to bring them into this situation. But I think the question I want to get to is, why is this kind of scenario created in the first place? And that is for our pleasure, our human pleasure. And so this goes back to the whole thing about the senses and the deep seduction of sensory pleasures through the eyes, through sound, through touch, even through smell. And I'm thinking about also, when I go for a walk in the forest with my dog, one of the things that really strikes me now, or even walking on the beach, is those people who can't seem to be present on their walk. They either have their earbuds in or some big headphones on, or they're on their device and they're not actually present on their walk. They're not aware of either what their dog's doing or what the beautiful surroundings are. There's this sense of disconnection. And so I think this card really moves in both directions, between that obsessiveness with all of these sensory experiences and a complete disconnect from them. And so what I'm going to do is kind of go through these decks one by one and share with you some of the things that have come up for me and how they relate to me personally. In the Druidcraft Tarot, the Devil card is called Cernunnos. And from the guidebook, I'm just going to read a couple of sentences. Cernunnos teaches us how to live effectively in the material world without becoming trapped by the glamour and illusion offered by a world obsessed with wealth, status, sexuality, and violence. And so part of the process of transcending the Devil card, integrating the energy of the Devil card and having this as a card of the year and working with it consciously month to month is, I think transcend is a beautiful word. So it's to transcend that worldly attachment. So to be okay with the passion, all of these cards I'm showing you here, passion, right? So these deeply emotional, physically beautiful relationships, to be in the joy and the pleasure of that without moving to the extreme of being in the addiction. And I think all of these cards are so beautiful. We see these lovers in the sensuality of the touch and the beauty of the touch and the beauty of the relationship, and a deep connection as well with the nature and Cernunnos in the background. This one is called Shadow Dance from Tarot of the Hidden Realm. And then over on the right, this is from The Beautiful Rebellion, which, by the way, is coming out again soon, I hear. And so there's this connection with nature. And if we can connect the beauty of nature with the beauty of this kind of energy that the Devil card brings up, I think then we see a much lighter side of the energy of the Devil and an integration of the energy of the Devil, rather than looking at it as a all-consuming kind of card. This one has kind of bothered me a lot. This is from the Lily White Tarot by Celia Millsville. When I first saw this card, it almost to me looks like the man, the Devil in the background, is holding onto a small child, just the way that the right hand is placed. But in reading the guidebook, and of course I'm reading it word by word in translation, this is not a young child. This is a male-female relationship, and this embrace is so warm and so intriguing and so passionate that the woman in the card, in the guidebook, it's just beautiful the way she describes it, is falling into the warmth and the arms. And there's a sense of letting go, a sense of release from the everyday, a sense of finally giving yourself permission to just be in the beauty of this experience. And I just love the way that she describes it. And so why have we associated this sense of letting go and to surrendering to the beauty of this energy with this negative association? And I think quite simply it's because when we have these passions that are associated with physical pleasure, and I'm going to go back to the Everyday Witch here, which seems quite a simple card, the physical pleasure being money or the ice cream cone, we find that it's really easy to get carried away, and that ice cream cone becomes a habit that we have, every night or every week, and money comes out of, gets out of control. And I know also that, where was it? I had the card from the Slow Tarot. Oh, it's right here. Is a card that's really disturbed a lot of people. And I'm going to read you something that I found, that I received from the creator of this deck in just a moment. And here's another beautiful card. This is from the Yonasi Yaos Tarot. And because the coloration of this deck is in very few colors, she had a hard time adjusting the color palette to match the energy of this deck. But we have a very beautiful seductive energy here. This deep purple is connected to the energy of red, and also the flower. I believe it had the word hell in the name of the flower. And so again, I'm questioning why is this card, why does this card have such a negative connotation? And so for me, it's this interplay of going back to the 14 and understanding what all these joys and pleasures are about and how to keep this all in balance. I believe several months ago, I was talking about something on one of my lives, and I mentioned that I don't have a bathroom scale in my house because when I was a young woman I guess it was pretty much started at the end of high school, it became, I had a problem with addiction and, with bulimia and food and my relationship with food. And when I look back at the weight I was at that time, I was actually going to a program. It wasn't Jenny Craig or Weight Watchers, but it was one of those programs where you go and you weigh in once a week and you get your food plan. And I wasn't even heavy. It was insane now that I look back and I think about that obsessiveness with that, those expectations of society and how we're supposed to look and how much we're supposed to weigh. And as I got older and developed a better relationship with my physical body and how I felt, I decided that was not something that I wanted to have in my home. I didn't want my children to be obsessed, my girls in particular, with the bathroom scale. And so I haven't had one for years and years. And let me show you some other cards here because there's just so many. This is really beautiful. There's just so many different ways that these images have been portrayed. This is I'm going to speak to the Osho Zen. This is the Sasarai Bido. Here is the double card from, I don't want to lose my thought. Oh my goodness. It'll come back to me. So I didn't want my girls to be obsessed with the bathroom scale. And I always have enjoyed cooking. I'm a good cook. I'm aware of food. I only became a vegetarian in 2012, and I would say I'm a vegetarian vegan. I go both ways. If I am somewhere where there is no choice, or I know that the animals or the fish and all of that has been created with love. I will eat it, but it's not my first choice. So my relationship with food is it's always been very conscious since I was a young person. And more recently, my weight began to creep up and creep up. And this is in connection with my finding my own path, learning who I am, relearning who I am, starting my life over in my 50s, recreating myself, starting to support myself in a new way. And I was not paying attention to my eating habits. And the weight slowly creeped on and on and on. I did not have a scale in the house. I did not weigh myself. And then one day I had the shock of my life. And so I very quickly began to make some observations. And that was this year. So I switched that all up right around the time, coincidentally, and I say coincidentally, that I did my year ahead spread, and I figured out my card of the year, and actually it was after that. And so there's this really interesting correspondence. Like, I really needed this card to come up this year, and it's been so perfect. In the Osho Zen Tarot, there is a lion cub that somehow gets, he's a stray. I don't remember how the story happens, but the lion cub grows up in a pack of sheep. And the lion cub does not know that he's a lion, does not know that he can roar, and that if the lion were in another environment would probably consume the sheep for its meal. But the lion grew up grazing on grass with all of these sheep, and so didn't know what was at its core, didn't know who he was energetically, karmically, and so forth. And so this card, I believe it's called Conditioning. I cut the keywords off this deck years some time ago. Anyway, the short version is very much like the story of the Lion King, in that scene where Simba goes to look into the pool of water and sees his own reflection and realizes the power within. And so the lion becomes a lion and leaves the pack of sheep and steps out onto his own. And I feel like I really understand that story, those years and years of conditioning, of doing what I thought I was supposed to do. And now, finally and oddly, that is my sun sign, is the lion, stepping out on my own to find my own way. And so the devil is such a, I don't know, that word, I wish we could come up with another word. The shadow doesn't work exactly well either. Can appear in many, many forms, can appear like the nice guy next door. And so I don't want to say being hypervigilant, because that's taking something to an extreme, but to not become so complacent that 20, 30, 40 pounds amasses on, or compulsions go to the point of addictions and so forth. I think this is why this card comes up, right? That one glass of wine every night becomes half a bottle, becomes a bottle of wine every single night. Let's look at a few more cards. The card in the center is from the Vision Quest Tarot. It's called Torment. Ego, bondage, attachment, identification with matter, greed and possessiveness, envy, fear, inflexibility on many levels. If you use your energy mainly to fulfill the endless variety of your ego's desires, you tie yourself to an internal whipping post. Look at how you bind yourself, and to what. What notions enslave you? What opinions have you taken on as your own without questioning? Remember how much is simply self-created and recreated by endlessly repeating restrictive thoughts. The thought of not being good enough or not getting enough creates fear. You identify with this bundle of fear, and from now on, it colors all your experiences. If you recognize this mental loop, you can break out of it, but not with force, only with more awareness. And I think for me that having this card for this year is really creating this sense of spaciousness, this sense of awareness. And in this guidebook, the writer was talking about endlessly repeating restrictive thoughts and this bundle of fear. And so in reaction to a lot of this, that's when we go, to the cupcakes or the wine or shopping or whatever your addiction is. So I really like that metaphor of the internal whipping post. In the Urban Tarot, which is the one on the left, Robin Scott, they say, it represents how our own hedonism, fear, self-doubt, and laziness can keep us in chains, holding us back from what we really want and keeping us from achieving what we're capable of. We all have addictions. We know how, and I think that's a little bit strong of a word. I was taking this course, one of my yoga and nidra trainings, and we were encouraged to be careful of that word because it is a very strong word. We could use a word compulsion or habits, So anyway, that's a word I want to be very mindful of. We know that we should break out of, but do not. At one time or another, we all worship at the devil's altar and do things we know we shouldn't do. But I think the key is asking, why do we do them? What is the fear that is underlying that? We're not good enough. There's definitely a connection between all of this stuff, which is connected to our second chakra, and the ego, the third chakra. There's this self-esteem that's connected very much between the two chakras. There is no need in my mind to equate the harm we do to ourselves and to others, this is Robin speaking, with some larger concept of sin. It is enough to recognize that we have fallen into a trap that is unhealthy and to begin taking steps towards a healthier path. Neither is it particularly useful for us to ladle more guilt upon ourselves for failing in the first place, as that self-destructive guilt is often part of what keeps us helplessly in chains. And then look at this beautiful card from the Gaian. So the artwork is absolutely stunning. Joanna Powell Colbert calls this card life out of balance. And like I was saying earlier, she does draw in this connection with temperance and with this 15th card. Temperance reminds us to live a balanced life. The bindweed card depicts a life lived desperately out of balance. The figure is in despair, bound to its own addictions. He sees no way out. His internal struggle is reflected in the world around him, where non-native invasive plants and birds crowd out native species, causing a severe imbalance in the ecosystem. And I can definitely see connections with that New Era Elements card here. Because how do all of these horrific experiences happen that we see pictured in this particular devil card, if not because ecosystems, political systems, religious systems, all kinds of institutions get out of whack? And so depending on the deck that you choose and the deck that you're working with, there may be a certain kind of reflection aspect of the energy of this devil card that will help you to understand and to see what's really going on with yourself at this particular time, or to bring awareness, to shine a light to your own addiction, to your own compulsion, to your own fear or self-doubt. So now let's look to the potential of this card, the power that lies within this card. Yeah, we may have fallen into the depths of our habits and our compulsions, but there is a strength. There is a tremendous power in understanding what is really underneath all of this and how to come out the other side. Going back to the slow tarot on the right, the woman in the card is a belly dancer, a dominatrix, a practicing witch, and is the founding member of the Coven of Ashes, which is an occult performance art collective based in LA. She is very comfortable with who she is as a person, and the comfort and power that she holds within her has nothing to do with shame. The intention of this card was to celebrate her power and her comfort with who she is. The figure in this card is the one running the show, and she does not give a damn about your preconceived ideals. And this kind of takes me back right here to this lion that lived in this community and had all these preconceived ideals. And it wasn't until the lion was able to look at its own reflection that it knew its own strength and power. Sounds like we're talking about the strength card here. Okay, so what is this internal power about? Oh, and then this other connection. So this is also in the notes from Lacey Bryant. She talks about the catharsis of giving into pleasure. So there's this, in the sense of letting go, we're able to understand what this internal life force is about. And I think if I could translate French better, that is what Celia is talking about in her description of this card as well, too, is that tremendous amount of energy, life force energy that is released and can be transformed and transmuted if we know how to use it. Going back to the Druid Craft Guidebook, I have a few more notes here. The enormous power of the energy within can be used for creativity rather than overindulgence, obsessiveness, or greed. All we need to do is integrate and channel life force energy for the greater good. The time for denying responsibility is over, and Cernunnos calls us to awake, and in doing so offers us the potential for both abundance and liberation. There are so many juicy nuggets in this card, and I'm actually really excited to continue exploring it in different decks with different ideas from different deck creators, and to do some more reading and choose some novels and music that is going to help me explore and to really unravel what this card means for me this year, and also how it's connected to each of my cards for each of the months that are still ahead in 2020. But I want to wind this up and connect the whole idea of the 15th card with the 6th card, and that idea of choice, because that is a key word that often comes up when we're looking at the Lovers and the Devil card. Choice. The choice. What are we going to do with this choice? How are we going to choose to use this internal life force, this internal power? And I'm just staring at this card again. Sorry, I want to go back to the Everyday Witch. Deborah Blake says in her guidebook that we're often more comfortable in the negativity. The negativity meaning the ice cream cone and the money. The dysfunction is so much easier, and it's easier to be with what we're used to doing. It's easier to be in that old groove than it is to step out of that groove. And I was talking about walking in the forest and people having on their earbuds or their headphones, or not knowing what their dog is doing, or they're on a device. They're completely oblivious to nature, and there's that sense of connection, disconnection. So all of these things are choices. And even in this beautiful green witch tarot card here, I'm just going to go to the guidebook because I feel like I'm off on a rant here. This is the card of wild nature, where the path chosen may be joyful and unrestricted or fraught with unseen dangers and overgrown vines. Here, the trapper is setting a bear trap, unaware that a bear is behind him, watching. The man is equally oblivious to the fawns of the wilderness dancing in the distant clearing, one even beckoning to the bear. So both the bear and the man are oblivious to what's going on behind them. Choices are the highlight of this card, as are possible repercussions. Right? So that's something I haven't mentioned so far. The warning is that short-term goals that require personal sacrifice are not always in one's best interest. Will the bear join the revelry of the nature spirits, or will it risk being entrapped by reaching into something unnatural? People also choose the direction they travel in their lives, and sometimes what originally seems like a blessing turns out to be false. Then the choice becomes whether or not to liberate oneself. Okay, there's many other examples here, but so that choice is one of liberation. It's one of freedom. It's one of channeling that energy so that we can really bust free of this internal whipping post. Yeah, so I hope this has given you some food for thought about this card, and especially if this is your card of the year, I would love to hear how it's working for you this year and how it's shown up and what you're doing about that, really, because isn't that what our card of the year is about? It's about making these shifts, making these changes. So, thank you. Thank you very much for being here today, and I look forward to chatting with you in the comments below. Stay well, my friends. Namaste.